Hi, everybody. Jeff Wise back with you with an update on the seabed search for the wreckage of MH370. Today is Sunday, November 23rd, and Ocean Infinity's ship Armada 8605 has been deployed to the Philippines. Today, I'm going to talk about where it might go next, where's the seabed search going to be carried out, and why. That's all right now. Okay, welcome to another episode of Finding MH370, the show where we rigorously assess a wide variety of evidence in order to definitively solve the greatest mystery in aviation once and for all. One of the areas that I'm not going to get into in today's episode, but that I'm researching quite heavily at the moment, is the Boeing 777's flight control system. And I could really use some technical help if anybody out there wants to pitch in. If you're listening to this and you are an MRO technician or avionics engineer and you know about the 777 ACE or PCUs, please do reach out. I would be very grateful. Thank you. Okay, back to the main topic. Right now, one of the greatest puzzles within the greater mystery of MH370 is, of course, where is the plane's wreckage? So far, over the last 10 years, more than 200,000 square kilometers of the seabed has been scanned in really photographic detail. There has been no sign of wreckage on the seabed. So that's been a big surprise, of course, because when the search first started, officials were really confident that they would find the plane quite quickly. There was an early quote from one of the search officials that said, we've got a bottle of Moet chilling nicely in the fridge. That bottle is still in that fridge. A lot of folks are hoping that the latest iteration of the seabed search will put that puzzle to rest. As we discussed in previous episodes, the Malaysian government has approved a proposal by Ocean Infinity to restart its no find, no fee search of the seabed, which briefly restarted in March of this year, went on hiatus. At the time, it was believed that the search would restart in November. Obviously, that hasn't happened yet. However, all eyes are on a particular vessel. This is Armada 8605. It is a newly built, very much state-of-the-art vessel. The leading expert on Ocean Infinity's activities, Kevin Rupp, who has been covering this excellently on Twitter and on Facebook, says that while we don't know for sure, the expectation is that this is the ship that will be tasked with continuing the search. It left Singapore on November 8th. It headed for the Philippines, where it was scheduled to take part in a 2-week-long project to search the San Bernardino Strait for historical wrecks, meaning galleon trade during the time of the Spanish colonial era, and then also World War II wrecks. There was a lot of battles between the U.S. Navy and Japan around here. So that could be an interesting area to search. It arrived on the coast of central Visayas on November 13th. Then it pressed on and arrived on the 16th at the port of Matnog on the San Bernardino Strait. It started to search around there. We can see here a very typical search pattern as the ship launches and retrieves AUVs. These are those torpedo-shaped robot subs that autonomously scan the seabed, and then they return periodically to get their batteries recharged and their data downloaded, and then they're relaunched. So that looks like a very kind of zigzaggy pattern as the AUVs are deployed and retaken up again. Okay, so on November 21st, the ship left that particular area and moved to the northeast. Not really sure why. At any rate, it soon returned to the search area. At present, and this is the latest image from Kevin Rupp, it shows just today that the vessel is continuing its work. So the long and short of it is that we're about midway through what is expected to be a 2-week operation, at the end of which A8605 should return to port to refuel and reload supplies and new personnel, and then it will go, we hope and expect, to the MH370 search area by the 7th Arc in the southern Indian Ocean. So 2 possible routes it could take would be to return to Singapore for that resupply, or it could just go straight south to Perth, which Ocean Infinity has used as a base during previous searches in the area. Okay, so now I want to move on to the meat of the episode, which is where is it going to look exactly and why? So as you'll remember, the zone in which the seabed search has been taking place is primarily defined based on signals that were sent from the plane after it disappeared from primary radar. Those signals were recorded by Inmarsat, the satellite data company. It was subsequently analyzed by scientists there at Inmarsat and also in the Australian government. They used these signals to generate a probability heat map for where they thought the plane most likely was. It looks like this. I sometimes liken it to a fried egg. The part in the middle is where the probability density is highest. In other words, that's where they calculated it was most likely to be. And then as you get further and further away from that central area, the probability goes down. So this particular area that they identified stretches from about 40 degrees south latitude to 34 degrees south. That rectangle is the original search area that they recommended. And here's another look at that same distribution. So the red line marks the 90% confidence region. So they calculated there was a 90% chance that it was within that line. And the pale blue line marks the 99% confidence region. So basically, they figured that if they searched the rectangle, if you look at how the rectangle compares to those lines, it's about a 90% chance of hitting pay dirt within that rectangle. And, if they got really unlucky, that 1 in 10 chance happened and they didn't find it, basically they could seal the deal by just searching a little bit further. So an important thing to understand about the box is that it's a two-dimensional object that was laid out using two different probability distributions, one along each axis. The first one is the probability of where the plane was along the arc when it made its first ping. How far north or south was it along the 7th arc? And this tells us how long the search box is. We talked about how they calculated this in episode 21. Here's a link to that right there. And the second probability is how far did the plane go from the 7th arc after it made that ping, when it had presumably run out of fuel. So did it go straight into the water? Did it go sort of nose down and straight in, or did it glide for a while? And this tells us the width of the box. So we talked about how they calculated that in episode 4. There's a link right here. So let's look at where they wound up searching in comparison to that original search box. As you can see, they searched the whole length of it, but the further north they went, the smaller the distance they looked from the arc. Okay, so this bottom colored in area is where the ATSB conducted this search. It was about 120,000 square kilometers. And then the area that is just outlined, that is where Ocean Infinity subsequently searched, and that was about another 120,000, more or less, square kilometers. So clearly their thinking was that their assumptions had been wrong about where along the arc it might be, but they were pretty convinced that it couldn't be further out from the arc. And so they went a lot further north, but they didn't go. They kept pretty close to the arc as they went further north. And so the reason for that is that the Inmarsat data indicated that the plane was in a steep and accelerating dive in its final moments. So that the reasoning was that given that, it couldn't have gone too far. So as a result, they hadn't searched this one corner of the box, the original search box. So one of the first things that Ocean Infinity did when they restarted the latest phase in March, the first thing they did actually was to search a central area where they had already searched in quite detail, but there were data gaps. So they wanted to make sure that the plane's wreckage wasn't in one of those data gaps. Then they went down to look in this corner of the original search box that hadn't yet been searched. So then they searched there, they didn't find it there. So at this point, the entire original search box has been searched. So what are they going to do next? My prediction is that they're going to just continue extending their seabed search northward from where they left off. And they're going to go up along an area that Victor Ianello and some people that he was collaborating with predicted is sort of a high probability area. Remember, the search area that they agreed on with Malaysia is quite small, only 15,000 square kilometers. So I think what they're going to do is continue that line they're on, get some of that remaining probability distribution, and then call it good. Now, you might think that since they've already searched the part of the ocean where the math said the plane was most likely to be, they're basically grasping at straws at this point. All that's left is area of the seabed that was originally considered very low probability. So you might think that their chance of success must be small. Well, what I'd like to talk to you about right now, and for the rest of this episode, is why Ocean Infinity probably doesn't see it that way. From their perspective, the fact that the high probability zone has already been searched without success actually means that their chances now are really, really high. That might seem a little counterintuitive. So to explain why that is, I want to look at a slightly simplified example of a probability distribution. As I've already said, the search pattern on the seabed is based on 2 dimensions of probability. So let's just look for now at a single dimension of probability, just for simplicity's sake, because I think the point will be equally valid. Okay. So here's my sort of imaginary scenario. Let's imagine that you're playing in the backyard with your kids, backyard of your house in the suburbs. I'm a suburban dad myself. And so after you go back inside, you're done playing, you realize, oh my gosh, I've lost my watch. My valuable heirloom watch is gone. And you go back outside to look for it. So you figure, like, I was just playing with my kids. I must have lost this watch in the backyard. And probably it's going to be in the middle of the yard, because that's where we were mostly playing. And so the further you go away from the middle of the yard, the less likely it is to be there. Okay, so here's how we can visualize this. The curve you're looking at here, it's called a normal distribution or a Gaussian distribution. This was an idea that was developed by mathematicians in the 18th and 19th centuries originally to understand things like coin tosses and gambling bets and errors in scientific observations, things like that. In a lot of cases where you have uncertainty, like where an electron is located in quantum mechanics or where an artillery shell is going to land, the probability distribution looks like this. It's very common in science. So for the sake of today's metaphor, let's say that your watch is somewhere in your backyard, and the chance that you're going to find it in any particular spot looks like this. So the chance that you'll find it in the middle is high, and the further away you go from the middle, the lower the chance is. Now, a characteristic of normal distribution is that most of it is found within what's known as a standard deviation. And to be more precise, about 2/3 of the probability distribution is within 1 standard deviation of the mean, the middle part. This particular graph has been drawn such that the mean is 50 and 1 standard deviation is 10. So if we search out to 60, then we've incorporated 88% of the total probability distribution. So naturally, that's where we're going to look. And what happens if we search that area and we don't find it? So this chart shows what happens if we search the entire part of the field on the left-hand side and 1 standard deviation out to the right. So from 0 to 60. So having done that, I've actually searched 84% of the original total probability distribution because, we've searched not only the middle, but also the entire tail on the left-hand side as well. Okay, so what's interesting is that the probability, having searched that area and not found it, the probability at 61 and 63 and 73 and all that stuff off to the right, which I haven't searched yet, the probability that it's there has actually gone up. Okay, why is that? Because I'm 100% sure that the watch must be somewhere in the backyard. So all these remaining probability distributions in the area I haven't searched have to add up to 1, have to add up to certainty. And if you look carefully, you'll see that the peak is actually higher here at the edge of the search zone than it was before I started looking. The probability distribution has become more concentrated, and what that means is that for every square foot I search has a higher probability of yielding success. Okay, so let's go a little further. Let's say I search the new high probability area and I still don't find it. So am I running out of luck? No, not at all. The percentage chance that it's in the remaining area is still 100%. We know it's in the backyard. So look at this. This is the remaining probability density after I've searched out to 2 standard deviations. This is out to 70, and the peak is even higher. All right, let's go out to 3 standard deviations. Now I've searched out to 98.37% of the original probability density. And since I know it isn't on the left anywhere, and I know it has to be somewhere on the right, all of that probability density is now jammed into an area that once accounted for just 0.13% of it. And my chances of finding it within the next 5 feet is really, really high. So that's the situation that I think Ocean Infinity finds itself in right now. Even though the plane hasn't turned up anywhere in the 98 or 99 or 99.5, whatever, of the original search probability density that they originally set out for themselves, that only means that their chance of being successful in the next 10,000 square kilometers has only gotten exponentially higher. Because the plane absolutely has to be somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean. Once they get back to continuing where they left off the search, their chances of hitting pay dirt are really, really good. That's just how that math works. It's a little counterintuitive, but that's probably what they're thinking. However, there's a potential flaw in their logic that I think will be important to bear in mind as we await the results of the new search. Let's go back to the original scenario and our original probability distribution, but let's add a twist. Okay, let's say that there's a 1% chance that my assumption that I had to have lost it in the backyard was wrong. I didn't lose it. My watch playing with my kids in the backyard. Something else happened. And I don't know what it is, but let's just say there's a 1% chance that I lost it somewhere else. Okay, so now the probability distribution looks like this. It pretty much looks the same as before, but there's a little nub over here on the right, off to the side, that represents that 1% alternative possibility. It's a negligible amount, doesn't really affect how things look overall. For the time being, you could reasonably set it aside and just go about your search the same way you did before. So let's do that and imagine that, again, we've had the same result as before. Here we have the probability distribution after searching, again, to 60 and not finding anything. So as before, you've got a significantly higher probability distribution right at the edge of the search area. So that's still the most likely place to look. But check out this bit over here. This little nub has gotten significantly bigger. And so what was a very unlikely anomaly with a 1% chance of being right has now grown to a 6% probability. Okay, that makes sense, right? Because the more of the yard that I search without finding my watch, the greater the chance that I didn't lose it there in the first place. Okay, so let's keep searching. Now we've searched up to 2 standard deviations away from the mean, up to 70, and we've now searched 97.7% of the original probability distribution. And again, one more time, there's a lot of good hunting to be had right past the area we last searched. But look at this. It's not the most likely anymore. The 1% anomaly has now swollen to 30%. So this isn't really just an anomaly anymore. This is a serious contender. All right, let's keep going. Let's go out to 80, 3 standard deviations from the mean. Now we've searched 99.37% of the original distribution. And what was once a very unlikely seeming anomaly is now by far the most likely explanation for where the watch is, with an 88.7 probability. Why is that? Because you've looked almost everywhere the watch could be in the backyard. It's not there. So now it's probably somewhere else. And what's interesting about this result is that as long as you allow any probability at all to the option that the thing you're looking for is in the original search area, it's going to get considerably bigger if you search out most of that area without success. So, for instance, let's say that instead of a 1% probability that the anomaly is correct, let's give it just a 0.1% probability, 1/10 of 1%. After we search out to 3 standard deviations, that anomaly is now worth 44% of the remaining probability. It's practically a coin toss from just 0.1%. So if you take it all together, this explains both why Ocean Infinity is still confident enough in the search area to spend more millions of their dollars. It also explains why they might be wrong. They think their odds are going up and up because they can't imagine any possible explanation other than that the plane went into the Southern Ocean. But the more that they search without finding anything, the higher the probability, no matter how low it may have started at, that what happened to the plane is something else entirely. And it didn't go into the Southern Indian Ocean at all. All of which brings us back to Armada 8605. In the weeks to come, it should be wrapping up the current mission and starting to make its way to the seabed search area. Hopefully, they'll keep it up until the designated area is finished. And once that happens, we'll have a much better understanding of whether their assumptions were 100% correct or whether there was an anomaly that their imagination just didn't have room for. That's all I have for you today, but stay tuned because I have a bunch of really interesting new developments that I'm going to tell you about in the next episodes to come. If you'd like to get an email about those when they drop, you can sign up at the show page at findingmh370.com. You can also sign for a paid membership if you'd like. That would help me out a lot and give you a lot of encouragement. And you can also subscribe here on YouTube. They also have paid subscriptions. So anyway, thank you so much for your support. Thanks for your time. For now, this is Jeff Wise saying, see you next time.